Hi, Elaine here. Every morning I look in the mirror and take stock of my growing collection of white hairs that grace my temple. So far, I have not been enticed to rectify the situation, either by pulling them out or dyeing them, but I have noted the increase in numbers, particularly in the years since the pandemic. It makes me think of the beauty industry surrounding aging. As women, we are subjected to the standards of beauty that are aimed at selling us solutions long before we hit puberty. But somewhere in my 20s, I noticed that the market changed. No longer was it offering a solution for simple beautification, but now offers included the suspension of the effects of time, with anti-aging serums and supplements at the forefront. And it would be remiss not to mention the uptick in cosmetic procedures, like botox and plastic surgery. Today, I'm sitting down with Carlyn to discuss how we feel about the vanity in and pressure to hide the superficial symptoms of getting older. Again, I'm Elaine.
And I'm Carlyn.
Welcome to our podcast, Related. So, Carlyn.
Elaine.
Just to define the term, what do you think is old?
Old and age is relative. If I think back to when I was 8 or 9 years old, I thought 20-year-olds were really effing old, right? And then sort of on the flip side of that, now that I'm in my late 30s, quickly nearing 40, people who are in their 60s and 70s don't feel as old to me either, too. So how do I define old? Again, I think it's very subjective. I also think it differs for men and women, too. I think I have, and maybe it's also because I am a woman, so I better identify. I do think there is a tendency among women, especially to sort of maybe after you turn 40 or maybe after you go through menopause. I don't know sort of what the specific milestones are, but you're officially in midlife. You're sort of a halfway through your life. Your body is also starting to show the signs of aging in a way that maybe they didn't in your 30s and your 20s. So that's maybe that's how society starts to describe it. And I think it's how I define old is I think also how the world treats you too, right? You know, in the articles that you and I were reading as preparation for this, a lot of it talks about, you know, quote, normal people, but also a lot about celebrities as well too. And women in Hollywood, for example, who aren't getting the same roles anymore as soon as they hit their 40s or even frankly late 30s. Or thinking about, you know, the career I've had primarily in tech where I don't see a lot of older women in tech, for example. So is that an ageist thing? I don't know. So I'm
though in tech, for granted, I feel like STEM and pushing women towards STEM really happened for Generation X and maybe millennials for the first time. Like, I don't think
but I'm not just talking. But I'm not just talking about engineering roles. I'm talking about like consumer tech or tech companies in Silicon Valley where there are marketers, there are humanities majors, and you just don't see many people over the age of 50, especially women in the workplace. So what is old? Again, I think it's both a relative term. If I had to put a pin on what it is for women, maybe in the sort of you start to get old or feel old in the sort of 45 to 50 range, maybe after 50. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah.
So I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I would add that I think that there has been kind of a suspension of physical aging. Like, I think that we're more active. I think our parents' generation is more active than our grandparents' generation were as they were nearing 70.
Yep.
So I think that there's more physicality in growing old than there maybe used to be.
Yep.
And I do think, you know, life expectancy has gotten longer. So I think that there are evolving.
Yep. People are generally healthier. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question then is, do you feel old? It sounds like from what you were saying is that you think old is like a little ways off, but maybe approaching.
Well, I think the way that a lot of people define old is maybe, again, I think I may be one of the few that I know of my friends, for example, who kind of enjoys the aging process or the process of getting older. I think from a mental and emotional perspective, I just feel like I know myself a lot better.
Yeah.
I am a lot more aware of both the things that I've learned and also the scope of the things that I still have yet to learn. And there's an
Yeah.
excitement in sort of what wisdom and age brings you. Do I like that on runs these days my knees start to ache, 2 miles into a jog? No. Do I love the fact that I'm much more susceptible to herniated discs and get sciatica? No. And, I, like you, also am starting to gray sort of near my ears. My hairdresser has informed me very kindly. She's like, "It's great compared to my other clients. You have your age is great." I have a couple of sort of stragglers in the back as well, but I don't know. But I also don't. I don't know that, like, compared to it, how maybe some of my peers feel. I don't feel old, but I also don't know if it's is it because I'm not married? Is it because I don't have kids?
Mm.
Is it I just still feel very optimistically and hopefully that there's still a lot of life left to live and experiences left to be had.
I think that's the same. I don't really have any specific health concerns. I've stayed pretty active. I do notice sometimes in the mornings that it's a little stiffer when I get out of bed. And I do have sometimes when I have my period, I get cramps
Yep.
and that hurts my back in a way that it
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
when I
Same.
was a teenager. um,
Also can't
but
like I can barely have a glass of wine and not feel the impact of it the next day, for example.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that for me is an effective aging or maybe the fact that during the pandemic I really didn't drink a lot of
Fair.
alcohol. And
Yeah.
so I think I
Yeah.
like went from lawyer social events, which are very heavily alcohol, to after the pandemic, like drinking maybe one or two drinks a week
Yeah.
and made me a lightweight.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. I mean, the other thing, I need so much sleep these days. I'm a total grumpy pants, cranky pants, which maybe arguably was always the case, but I was able to get away with a lot less sleep, especially in my 20s than I am now.
Yeah. Though I do think that we operate our kids in this society on like a lot less sleep than they need.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
we
Yes.
are definitely more susceptible to it.
Yes. Yes.
So did I ask if you think you look old?
If I think I look old. Okay, that's another question. I
Yeah, we're veering into the
yeah,
superficiality of aging.
So I think I look older for sure. I mean, I think when I look at photos of myself, even 5 years ago, I perceptibly noticed the difference. That said, when I tell people my age, I am often met with shock
Hmm.
because people think that I'm actually, at least how the world perceives me, is a lot younger than I actually am. And I think part of it is the black don't crack component of it of I've got these cheeks that mom and dad always, lovingly pinch that I think give me some youthfulness. I don't have I have I'm like squinching my head. I have some forehead lines, but I don't have a ton of wrinkles yet. But again, this is where like the old I think becomes relative. It's sometimes how does the world perceive you? And if the world mistook me for 5, 10 years older than I am, then I would both, I think, feel older and maybe my answer to your question would be like, yes, I look older
Mm.
or look old, if that makes sense. So my answer I think would be I personally think I look older and not in a negative way. I'm just like, if I look at pictures of myself from when I was 18 versus 25 versus 30,
Right.
and frankly, even like 35, which was only 3 years ago, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I have aged. But when someone meets me on the street for the first time, like in an Uber driver or whatnot, they're shocked when I tell them I'm almost 40.
Yeah. I think it's the same. Though I often wonder if people treat me like when I reveal my age, if they like do that shock thing out of politeness. But I do often get, "Oh, wait, you're like older than 35."
Yeah.
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 I don't think people think I'm like in my 20s, but especially since the gray hair, if you are
Yeah.
within like a conversational distance, you can see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I don't think people are mistaking me for like a 20 in my 20s,
Yeah.
but I mean maybe they are because I do know some 20-year-olds with like some graying hair. I
Yeah.
think that it's also really hard to pinpoint ages. Like I'm really bad at saying how
Yes.
old a person is
Yeah.
because I think it depends on like genetics,
Yeah.
a lot of whether they've had enhancements done to
Yes.
know
Yes.
what a person's age is. So
Yeah.
I also feel like because I'm so bad at it, I don't internalize when people do it to me, either in a beneficial or not way.
Totally. I will say, just to the enhancement piece, there are women in their 20s who are getting fillers who I actually think it makes them look older than they are
Yeah.
too. So, yeah, it is. I think it's really hard to pinpoint as well. So,
So what I'm getting is that you don't really think you look old, but just on the aging level, is it
yeah.
aging something you are resisting?
Um no. I don't think so. I'm enjoying the process. I mean, there are little, I mean, these are not like insignificant, but there are things of I'm like, oh yeah, my body is not going to look the same that it did when I was 16 years old anymore. And sort of the like, okay, I better let go of that, and that's okay. For me, it's like a very holistic thing. It's both how you appear to the world, and then again, the sort of mental and emotional component of what it actually means to age, where I think there's a lot of wisdom. I feel in some ways, arguably, someone might have looked at, let's say, like my body in college and been like, oh my gosh, that's like the best you'll ever look. But in some ways, I have felt the best in terms of like who I am in my more recent years. And I think it's been like, how do you like how does your appearance also like reflect that? And maybe I looked great in my early 20s, but maybe I didn't always feel great or feel
Yeah.
myself too.
Yeah.
So I think the tension that exists, right, is like, what does I feel in some ways like the most beautiful inside that I've ever felt? And then
Mm.
how does that reflect and manifest outside? Or I really, really enjoy the process of aging. Maybe I won't have that same answer after I'm 50 or 60, or when I have more aches and quakes and things like that. Yeah, I'm not resisting aging perhaps in the way that other people are. And I use that. I'm using a lot like my friends as a point of comparison.
I think that maybe our looks and our confidence are not necessarily correlated at all aspects in our life.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So I might not be as pretty as I used to be, but I think my confidence level is way higher than it's
Yeah.
ever been.
Well, for what it's worth, I still think you're beautiful.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Carlyn.
um,
so
I j-
so on the superficial level,
yeah.
are you resisting aging? It sounds like on a more holistic level, you are kind of accepting it as it comes.
I am. I've never really been one to wear like a ton of makeup, which I realize is also there's like some luck and like gratitude in that too. So for context for listeners, I live in Los Angeles where there's a lot of Botox and fillers and anti-aging. I would actually say that more of my friends than not here in LA have gotten Botox and have been getting Botox maybe even since our early 30s.
Mm.
But I have, for whatever reason, just been very resistant to the like botox filler thing. I think part of it is, I think once you start it, it's really hard to stop. Maybe I like part of the natural like movement where I'm just sort of like, if I can show other people that there is a way to age gracefully, like for example, one thing I was going to say, when as you were talking, that came up to mind is, I feel like in the past few years, there have been a lot more midlife and post midlife and older women just talking about beauty, talking about being a woman, an older woman, which has
Mm.
modeled the beauty of being an older woman. Like I'm thinking about everything from Amy Poehler's new Good Hang podcast, where she talks a lot about the Gen X experience, to like Julia Louise Dreyfus has a podcast where she talks with her mother about sort of the aging process, and it kind of beautifies it and makes it sort of
Mm.
an authentic thing for me where I I'm I don't know. If I look at like a Meryl Streep, and yes, she's aged, but she's like beautiful in all of her wrinkles, years later. And so I think there's a curiosity, frankly, for me of like, how will my body and face change as I grow? And there's like some beauty in that too. So I think there's a fear for me in like going down that phase where I'm like, well, I will never actually know what my face looks like.
Yeah.
Uh, so when it comes to like the face stuff, I'm a little resistant, like needles and things that will like literally change potentially my smile or how like I emotionally react, like freaks me out a little bit. Hair though, I will say I am most likely more than not going to start painting my grays just because they're so sporadic. They're shorter, so they'll like stick up here and here and there. Yeah, and I think if there's like any place where there's maybe a little bit more vanity for me, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna paint my grays, and I'm not gonna. I personally, it's not worth it to me to like shell out for, an actual colorist. I'm just going to get some Just
Mm.
for Men's like beard touch up, which my hairdresser recommended, and I'm just going to paint them.
I think it's interesting for me. We often talk about, and this is at the forefront of the conversation, is the
Yeah.
vanity that comes from trying to postpone aging. But
Yeah.
I also think that there's also a kind of vanity now, and maybe more so than there used to be, a vanity in aging gracefully, in that
Totally.
I think people take pride in
Yeah.
resisting kind of some of these outside pressures in
Yeah.
ways that they didn't used to. So I actually think that there's a vanity kind of maybe on both sides now that there wasn't
Totally.
previously.
Totally. And look, I will be the first to admit that I have zero judgment towards people who get Botox and fillers and even like plastic surgery. I'm like, you know what? It's your face and your money. Do what you will. But I do think there is like, if I'm being really honest, there's a little bit of pride that I'm able to say of like, yeah, I'm not getting any
Yeah.
work done. Yeah.
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 When you were talking about dyeing your hair, I'm actually probably won't dye my grays,
Yeah.
which is funny because I actually dyed my hair a lot growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
True.
various colors.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I'm resistant to dyeing the grays.
I don't think you need
Um
to have a reason.
I
Yeah.
think for me it was actually just that there were models in my life like mom
Yeah.
and Kathy
Yeah.
who just owned it and like looked great with gray hair.
Totally. And look, actually, if I had full gray right now, that might be a different conversation.
Mm,
I think it's for me, it's the weird little straggler placements. But I don't know. I like going back to the wrinkles, I'm kind of at I'm kind of at odds with how I'm thinking about wrinkles, right? Where because I'm like, well, but there's a beauty, right? There should like theoretically is a beauty in like watching your hair slowly go gray. But yeah, for whatever reason, I feel a little bit more vain about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not I don't want to say that I'm like I'm not going to do anything because
Yeah.
I also have like a skincare regimen.
Yep. Yep.
um,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
which in some parts is like a holdover from puberty where everybody kind of gets a
Yeah.
skincare routine.
Yep.
But I've definitely adjusted it in recent years as like
Yeah.
the needs of my skin have changed. Sunscreen was a huge thing in my 20s and I've
Yep.
continued that.
Yep. Yeah.
So there, it's not that I'm just like aging, come and take me.
Totally. But okay, so did you see Kris Jenner's face? Like
Mm,
her plastic surgery, her very intense plastic surgery, which is
yeah,
very well done, but she looks younger than her daughter Kim Kardashian.
yeah,
Like that's how effective the plastic surgery was. And she obviously spent $100,000. I think it was some special methodology where it's like every individual muscle was sort of.
yeah,
And I'm as we're talking, I was thinking, how would I feel or will I feel if at 60 I have gone through the normal aging process, but everyone else around me is doing all these things and looking at that point like 20 years younger than I am. I would like to think that I'd be able to sort of resist and carve my way out on path, but the reality is like at that point I would maybe succumb to some pressure to feel to look younger, especially if that becomes increasingly the norm. And also at that point, like I think you and I are at an interesting point right now where we are generally aging well, right? We're not
mm,
showing a ton of wrinkles. Our skin looks great. Like we don't have a ton of gray hairs. What would that look or feel like when we're 20 years along, more further along in the aging process?
yeah. I mean, one of the notes I wrote to myself was never say never. Like I didn't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
say never on this
Yeah.
podcast
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was like, if I do, it could come back and bite me in the
Totally.
ass.
Totally. Totally.
But
Yeah.
I do want to point out, I think the Kardashians are an interesting, I tend to think of things on a more holistic social
Yeah.
societal level.
Yeah.
And I actually don't mind the Kardashians
I
getting
don't either.
I
Oh,
like
getting plastic
but
surgery?
getting plastic surgery
Yeah.
because they are very transparent about it. Like no
Yeah.
one is hiding that
Yeah.
they are having
Yeah.
plastic surgery.
Yeah. That's so
um
true.
I mean, so maybe they do put more pressure on people to maybe have procedures, but no one is looking at the Kardashians and saying this is like an unrealistic standard of beauty. This is just like it's a
It's
manufactured
yeah, it's a wealth
standard of
influenced
beauty. Yeah.
manufacturing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But nobody is
Yeah.
looking at Kris Jenner and being like, why can't I look like that?
Totally.
The answer is because I don't have $100,000.
Totally. Of course. But I guess my point is, and again, in the hypothetical, it's like, that's a cutting edge technology. And what if it becomes as easily
No,
accessible as Botox, right? In 20
right?
years
No,
time. Right.
and that's why I brought it because I do think that there's like something insidious almost. Insidious? I don't know if that's the right word, but when people have these procedures but hide it,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially on the celebrity level,
Yeah.
where you act like there's something about the way you've been living, like I've been clean living,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you take the effects and say that somehow I'm just better than you.
Yeah.
I've been living a better life somehow
Yeah.
and not calling out what it is that's actually been done.
Totally. And I think when not calling it out, also setting potentially unattainable, unrealistic standards of quote natural beauty. I will say just like to the point of natural beauty, and this is like getting maybe a little bit away from aging, but I think the thing that also bugs me most, I think when we start to get into like maybe less Botox and more sort of fillers and plastic surgery, is my fear also is that women start to lose, and I've noticed this at least in celebrity culture, they start to lose their defining
Mm.
characteristics.
Yeah.
And so it becomes sort of this sea of sameness, which I I don't love. Like, yeah, I'm like, but you're also removing a defining characteristic, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, but I'm also like, you know what? You do you to make yourself feel beautiful and confident in the world. But I think I have maybe as we're talking, I'm like, one of the things that gives me pause about doing it myself is like, I want to be able to look in the mirror and say, like, that is me in the mirror. And that's someone that I'm familiar with and that the people I know and love are familiar with. And I do think, especially as you get older and do these procedures, it doesn't look natural. And it like doesn't, it makes people look kind of similar to one another in a
Yeah.
way that, yeah, I don't know that I want to just look like everybody else, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because I watch K dramas and we've mentioned it previously, but in South Korea, like cosmetic surgery is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that especially as actresses get older, I have a harder time
Hmm. Differentiating.
by differentiating between the actresses. And I do think some of that is like cross racial
Yeah.
identification but they do lose some of what makes them,
Yeah.
leaving aside what Botox kind of does to your face as an actor and
Yeah.
basically paralyzing part of your tool. But it is interesting on a more society level that there's like some kind of desire to look like everybody else.
Hmm.
And I think that is where my reluctance to have any procedures done on myself it comes from, is that I'm not sure I want it to be the standard.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind individuals getting
Yeah.
procedures,
Yeah.
but I think that if everybody's getting procedures, then that puts the pressure on other people who have not to do it,
Yeah.
and also on women who are younger than us.
No, I agree. It completely resets. I don't love, for example, and it's a weird tension and paradox because I similar to you, I don't mind. I'm like on an individual level. Again, sure, like you do you do what makes you
Yeah.
feel good and beautiful in this world, right?
Yes,
But
absolutely.
but on the other hand, I'm like the reason that will probably make you feel good and beautiful
Yes.
in this world, right, is because of existing standards of beauty. And
Yes.
so I do wish fewer women would feel the need to
Yes.
do those things to feel beautiful and confident in the world.
Absolutely.
And I don't know what that balance is.
We talk about like the pressures on women, but what is the outcome that you're hoping for? It's just that people live happier, more confident lives.
Yeah, I just so look, and I think it's such a tricky line is I do think there is some semblance, like an important component of like play and self-expression, right? When it comes to maybe not aging specifically, but like dyeing your hair or makeup or some of the articles we read were about women in retired living situations who are still have way more eyeshadow colors than I have ever had in my life, right? And take a lot of pride in sort of still applying a like expressive full face of makeup every
Yes.
day.
Yes.
And there is something in that, right? But that there's a balance, at least as those articles portrayed it, of, but they're like, okay, I'm older, so I still want to be who I am, but also like in being who I am, that's also a method of personal expression because I've always like been the one to so it's sort of like it's a fashion statement, right?
Right.
Too.
Right.
And
Right.
so yeah, so I like there's the piece that feels more sort of physical, if that makes sense, where it's like changing the shape of your face or like halting the actual aging process in some
Mm.
ways versus the more surface level, like I am going to get my nails done or my hair done or wear eyeshadow and a bright red lipstick everywhere, which I think it's related, but to me feels distinct in some
Yeah.
ways.
That's an interesting dichotomy to introduce, this expression versus conformity,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
seem to be at odds, but maybe it's more of a sliding scale.
Yeah. And I can also imagine if you in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, however long, leaned into one mode of personal expression in terms of how you dressed, what kind of makeup you wore. I can also see wanting to continue to hold on and evolve that as you get older, right? Because it's
Yeah.
part of sort of who
And
you are and how you want to show up to the world.
perhaps finding that more important as you get
Mm-hmm.
older.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's just an interesting tension
Yeah.
um for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So Carlin, just to wrap up, how do you see your own vanity?
I also I'm going to quickly turn this question back on you, more just cuz I'm curious, what is like how would you define vanity?
It's funny. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, cuz
Um,
I think cuz that was something that was coming up for me was what does it mean to be vain?
vain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is something what is the line between being vain and maybe being proud or also maybe being personally expressive,
Yeah.
right?
No, and I think that ties back to what I was asking before about the vanity in aging gracefully. Like
Yeah.
I don't maybe vanity is the wrong word because it's got so many negative connotations. Maybe
Yeah.
vanity is not the word we should be using.
Yeah. The other thing too is like what is self-care versus vanity too? I don't know. I was even trying to define how would I define vanity? Cuz it does have a negative connotation, right? It's like
Yeah.
you do something that you don't it's like superfluous, right? In some ways, right? It's like not something that you need to do. It's something that you want to do on a superficial level. And I think buys into things like beauty, money, wealth, status, right?
Yeah.
Um but aren't so many things that we do like related to that?
Yeah. So so maybe we should be talking about the awareness of aging and not going anywhere beyond that with judgments.
Yeah.
Either good or bad.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our conversation today, we look forward to sharing more with you.
Follow us now so that when our next episode premieres, you can be sure not to miss it. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
See you next time, everyone. It was funny. I was looking at Bubs just hopped into the room and I was looking at photos of him when he was a baby and I was like, I wonder if
He's
Bubs
aged.
he's aged. And I was like, I wonder if he like has any cognizant any like I don't know, like if he's like, man, I'm slowing down, you know?
I don't think bunnies experience time the way we do.
Probably not. Probably not. But
But
I'm always like, does he know that when he like falls asleep in his litter box, is he like, I'm old, man?
oh, bunny.
Oh, bunny.